Can you tell people why you are the right person to serve on Wilton's Planning and Zoning Commission?
Sure. Um, I think that I am a good person to serve on the commission because I care tremendously about not only what Wilton has to offer its residents in terms of both, housing and amenities, but I care a lot about what Wilton can afford and the impact on the budget of different choices that we make, whether that's about commercial or housing in the town. And I think that's what I really offer is both a business perspective and a caring perspective over making sure that we balance what we need in terms of housing and the fiscal responsibility that we all feel towards the town.
Give people a little insight as to where that business uh, background comes from and where that skill is going to come from.
I'm the chairman of a private equity firm that is headquartered in New York and Connecticut, as well as do M&A and investment banking in the field, and I own several other businesses.
And so, when you're talking about the goals and what you bring to planning and zoning, how do you think that the current planning and zoning, as it's composed now and as it's been operating, how well is it accomplishing those goals and serving the people of Wilton the way you think they should be?
Okay. Well, I think that by and large, the membership of planning and zoning tries, no matter what party they're from, to work very hard in a job that is, time consuming and sometimes controversial for the town. But I think that there are some real issues in the way that planning and zoning has been managed under the past administration that affects the public's faith in the decisions that are being made. Specifically, I think that the two areas that need a tremendous amount of improvement are public engagement and the ability to negotiate. And neither of those have been stalwarts of how planning and zoning has been run, at least since I'm on the commission. First and foremost, it's very hard to get things on the agenda. The chair of the commission controls the agenda. And although I've suggested it many times that we have more public engagement, I have not been able to get that on the agenda. I think there's one time that I demanded a vote during the meeting in order to get it on the agenda, and I was able to get a slight discussion. But the you could look at it two ways. On one hand, as we all know, there are ways for the public to engage during the process of either a single development where they can wait till the end of all the hearings have been completed and voice their opinion, or they can send in emails. But unfortunately, the expectation of that is twofold. One, that the members of the public who truly do care and are interested are going to patiently wait through that process and sometimes not be heard just because of the way the schedule and the agenda goes. Or two, that if they have something of a more general nature they want to discuss, it won't get on the agenda at all. And what I would really encourage is planning and zoning, like many other boards and commissions in Wilton, to set aside specific time in each meeting for a brief public comment so that we can take the temperature of what's going on in the town and really understand what the public is trying to say. And that hasn't happened.
And I've heard a lot of people expressing concerns about that. So how do you change that?
Well, you have to restructure how the meetings happen. So the current chair of the committee, of the commission, excuse me, has declined to engage with the public that way and feels like the regular opportunities that the public has are sufficient. I, along with a few other commissioners, don't feel that's the case. I think that we need to listen to the public. It does not mean as an elected official you have to do what the public says in a public, when the public says something, but you do need to be able to listen. And you need to listen in a way that makes the public comfortable of two things. One, they have an opportunity, and second, they are actually heard. And we have proposed many things, like I said, in meetings or outside of meetings, that we change the agenda for the meetings to allow that. And we were rebuffed by the chair of the commission, who wouldn't consider that and felt the current system works well. So that's one of the things I think needs to happen. Um, the second thing is that would be an opportunity to also explain what the commission actually does. Okay, and there's both correct perceptions and misperceptions when I read, what people say about planning and zoning in town of what the commission actually does. For example, I don't get to decide if I like pink better than blue. That's not what the commission is about. The commission is about making sure that the proposed developments or housing or whatever it is conforms to our regulations. Okay, and to have a robust discussion of that. And if somebody is asking for something that goes beyond our regulations, to understand and to comment on how it benefits the town. And some people understand that, and some people think that the commission can accept or deny an application just based on how we're feeling about something, which is not true. But without discussion about it, how it works per se, I don't think people really are aware of what the boundaries are, the rules are, and what the commission is actually trying to do. The second thing I think needs to change is the ability of the commission to negotiate. Okay. And sometimes the commission does things correctly, sometimes it makes mistakes. So if you look at some of the ways that affordable housing was addressed with regards to the downtown village rezoning, overlay, excuse me, it's not a rezone, it's an overlay. You'll find that certain things were not included in the original draft, that being the percentage of affordable housing that was going to be requested of a developer, which was, as much as I live in a business world where I don't get to cut people any slack for any mistakes. Outside of that, from a town perspective, I think it actually was a mistake. I mean, I don't think there was an insidious plot to do this or things like that. But what didn't happen was I didn't see the chair of the commission, who reserves the right to negotiate, approach developers and say, look, we made a mistake. So are you going to be a good town citizen or not be a good town citizen? And let them declare what they were going to do publicly based on that, which obviously, for the size of some of the owners and developers in the town, would put them in a position where maybe we would have been able to reconcile those differences. But I don't see a lot of negotiation going on that is successful. And I felt that way also when the town was negotiating, and I've seen the town negotiate around 830G. I've just never seen a successful strategy of negotiation with the developer versus, people getting very entrenched in their positions and not having the real discussions. So I think that that's another thing that both I can bring and some other people can bring. So if I go back to what I was saying, I think there is public engagement. There is the issue of negotiating with landlords. And there is one other thing which I would like to see. I would like to see more engagement and discussion of planning, not just zoning. I mean, as much as it is fun to spend 4 hours every other meeting discussing arcane zoning regulations with people who are bringing proposals to the committee and things like that, there really isn't a lot of discussion of planning. And I'll give you an example of that. There is a lot of, at least what I perceive as noise in the system. about what is the impact fiscally of these developments on Wilton. Is it going to be accretive or dilutive to the budget of the town? Okay. Is it going to cause what I call cliff events financially? Are we going to need a new fire truck for a great deal of money because we go over the amount that we can have? Or I'm not sure if ambuli is the plural of ambulances, but will we need another ambulance in town? Will we, will our schools have to be expanded, or do we believe the data and impact of what people say when they're developing a specific property? So, in general, the process of looking at an individual development is pretty good. Come on, they have to do traffic studies and people impact studies and environmental studies, and they have to do all kinds of things. But it's being looked at as on a development by development basis. So if you walked around Wilton and you asked people, what are the number of new apartments that will come online in Wilton? And what is the cost of that to both infrastructure? And what is the revenue differential that'll come into the town? Because generally these developments are replacing very low, poorly taxed properties. I have yet, and I've asked at the Board of Selectmen level, and I've asked at the planning and zoning level, and I've had some good conversations with people on the Board of Finance. I said, well, what is the impact? I mean, this is not difficult math, to do. But in general, I've not seen that. I've seen more in the town as a whole of people talking about things with very broad strokes. Like lots of people are concerned about that this is going to cost the town a lot of money. Well, I don't know what that means. Okay, I don't know who lots of people are. And B, I don't know if it's going to cost the town a lot of money. The rough calculations make me feel like it's probably going to be financially beneficial to the town. But the second thing people say is it will destroy the character of Wilton. And I personally kind of always take umbrage when somebody says the character of Wilton, because I don't know what the word character means. It's a really undefined and thrown around word in the Fairfield County towns. But even if I say it's a sense of small town community or a sense of, rural accessibility and things like that, I counter that with that the town needs to change. I don't know if any of you have gone to um, downtown Wilton recently for dinner, but when I'm tied up in New York in meetings and things like that, and I come home and I sometimes will stop in the center of town and grab myself a quick bite to eat. And if I see five people walking by, that's a good day. Wilton has not done a very good job of what I call activating the center of town. Okay. Parents don't drop their children off there to wander around aimlessly. And I personally, as a father, am somewhat in favor of free range children, but they grow up to be capable children. The town itself is really becomes a ghost town in the evenings. Something I believe should be done to make the town more vibrant and active and all those kinds of things. And there's talk about it, but I don't see a lot of action.
What would be action that you would suggest doing to make that happen?
Sure. So the surrounding towns, by the way, I don't believe Wilton is, I will state out flatly that if the goal of Wilton is to be Darien or New Canaan, that's a pipe dream because the economics and the average income and all those kinds of things in Wilton are not the same as they are in New Canaan and Darien. And quite frankly, if I wanted to live in New Canaan or Darien, I would have bought a house there. I think that Wilton is way behind, as it is in many things with its budgets, in terms of private and public partnerships. Okay. the other towns around us, whether they're addressing affordable housing, whether they're addressing whether there should be interesting places to walk, whether they're addressing whether they can attract, retail and small businesses and things like that, have been much more active in getting together with people who have some means and creating private and public partnerships with specific agendas and bringing them before the town and seeing if the town is interested in those. I've seen none of that in Wilton. I see great things, by the way. I see, the people who, I avidly hike in Wilton. I should probably hike more and then I would weigh less, but I avidly hike in Wilton, and things like that. And so I do see with, preservation of natural spaces in town and the Norwalk River Trail, I do see that kind of activity going on in town, but I don't see the energy behind public and private partnerships. Everybody always talks about that we're reserving areas for a river walk behind the buildings downtown. I have yet to see an active meeting where people talk about how they're going to fund that river walk and actually going to do anything about it. So that's one of the things I'd really like to see. Again, going back to what I said before, broadly, if there isn't a public engagement in the planning process, then look, we live in a town where, Heather, what is it? 10 to 15% of the people actually come out and vote in local elections in the town or something like that.
If we're lucky.
If we're lucky. People are busy. I mean, between their kids' sports and their, other activities and things like that. I get that. I mean, people are very, very busy and they probably didn't move to Wilton to be quote unquote politically involved. But if we gave people more opportunities to do so, that would be good to do.
Coming up, there's going to be the 2029 Plan of Conservation and Development. I know with the 2019, it seems like a lot of the actions that the current Planning and Zoning Commission has taken grew out of that. So there's this kind of disconnect with, was the public involved in that? Are they going to be just as involved in the 2029? I mean, to your point about, you need to get people to step up and be involved, are you going to be able to do that?
I think if we take a different policy towards making sure there is an active level of communication and getting people involved, people will be more involved. But I think it's a fantasy to think that just because something is posted as a hearing or posted as a meeting on the town website, that people will actually show up. I think the number of people who actively engage with the agendas on the town website and things like that is moderate at best. So one of the other things I asked for is, what is planning and zoning doing to create more active publicity to bring people in? And the attitude is more like we live in an old-fashioned Yankee town. If people are interested in doing something, they'll do it. And I think that's horrible marketing for the town.
Do you think that the meeting should be in a public space so that it's hybrid again, as opposed to exclusively online?
Yes, I think it would be hybrid again, except, oh, well, first, I think that Wilton needs to make an investment in hybrid technology that actually works. That would be excellent if we would actually have the budget from a Board of Selectmen point of view to do that, and we don't. But I would encourage them to be hybrid instead of online. For the same reason, in all of the businesses I own, I have insisted that people come back to work. It's not a political statement. It's a statement that I believe people have to interact and sit in rooms with each other and see each other and hear each other in person, as well as being boxes on a screen. I mean, that's personal opinion, but I believe it very strongly. I think that you get different things done when people are eye to eye in a room than you do when they're not.
You're bringing up some really interesting ideas about when you're talking about private-public partnerships. What would you envision? What would be some of the ideals that you'd like to see happening?
Well, first, let's take affordable housing. I'd like to see some sort of plan if the town could acquire property or work directly with specific developers to have more housing that meets the affordable test. Some people in town have expressed their wary of who might occupy that affordable housing, and they've confused affordable housing with I think it's Section 8 housing, which is far from being the same thing. I don't know if you're aware of the cost of an affordable apartment in one of the apartment buildings in Wilton, but it's if you use standard ratios to look at the affordability. A family has to probably make 150 to $200,000 a year to live in such an affordable apartment. So I'd like to see people actually meet and propose whether, a private developer along with the town would acquire space or land or existing buildings and do something about it, because we'll never catch up as the statute is currently written, given the number of affordable units that we have. Um, and I do personally think it's very important that the people who support Wilton and whether they are police, fire, administrative staff, have an opportunity to be part of the community that they are working in. So that would be one thing, and that's been successfully done in some of our neighboring towns. So the first thing is addressing affordability. The second thing is I'd like a real plan to be done which actually looks at the economic impact of these decisions. I've started working on that on my own, which is actually looking at what the revenue impact is of development and actually what the cost impacts are. But I have asked the members of our Board of Selectmen several times if they would take this on as a project, and I have so far not succeeded in being a lonely voice from little old planning and zoning in terms of getting people interested in that. At the same time, being kind of confused about the whole CFO and comptroller and all those issues and Wilton themselves. Can you imagine me going to a board meeting and saying, "Oh, well, the kinds of things that went on in Wilton went on in one of our companies." It's a board meeting I wouldn't want to have. So that's one of the things I'd like to see. I'd like to see people actually putting some planning into the budgeting and those kinds of things. And the third thing is I'd like to understand what we're going to do on a broader basis to deal with just some of the realities in Wilton. I mean, pretending things will happen, certain things will happen, won't make them happen. I mean, Wilton, the transportation from Wilton to other places in Connecticut or New York City is not great. So we just have to accept that and deal with that impacts the kind of town that we live in. Last time I checked, Amazon isn't going away. So the effect of that on retail in a town like Wilton. I don't have meetings on planning and zoning where I talk about what is a vibrant town center, what is vibrant for Georgetown, what is vibrant for Cannondale, and at least some discussion about it might get us some direction. And then the last thing is I would like to look at how do we actually work as a town to attract developers and builders who are interested in the kinds of things that the town is interested in. I don't see an active way of that. I don't see an active effort that is happening under today's issues. And let's go back to what I said at the beginning. Not talking about it publicly is certainly not going to solve any of those problems or even address those problems. Look, we can have those meetings and have that engagement and have that input, and the vast majority of people could believe things that are diametrically opposed to what I believe. Okay? But at least we had engagement and did something, okay, in order to draw the conclusions that we have instead of doing nothing. And it's sort of like we're just letting things happen to us, not proactively trying to make anything happen. Look, we're not spending the money on these developments. The developer is spending the money. Give you an example of a question. Go out and ask the average person who's saying something about planning and zoning if they think that the person who is developing a property has actually bought the property. The majority of them will say absolutely, at least the ones I've talked to, which is a unscientific poll of not the majority. But in reality, that's not true. They have some contract that says they will have a right to buy the property if it passes planning and zoning. It's simple things like that.
So
Could
you're
could I
one of
just
two incumbents running for reelection.
Yes.
Um, are you going to seek leadership to try and make this happen? I mean, how does that happen? How do you get to a place where you can make the changes you're talking about happen?
Okay, this gets political. I don't know whether I will seek leadership to do this. I unfortunately have a day job, and will continue to do so. But I do think that the Democrats have been. This is a political statement, but the Democrats have been in the minority on this committee for a long time. And the chairs have established themselves as not wanting any of these things. And I believe strongly that if the roles were reversed, that these things would be being addressed by the commission, whether I am in a leadership position, which is up to the commission as much as up to me, or if someone else from the Democrats takes that position instead of me. So I'm convinced that things can change and things don't have to be run exactly the same way as they are. There is one other issue. Wilton has been run for years in what I call a litigious averse process. So one of the things we're trying to do on planning and zoning is make sound decisions and not give developers an opportunity to sue the town because something wasn't handled properly. And I do understand that. But one of the excuses I've heard of not allowing for more public engagement is that the town's attorneys have put forth the idea that if we allow for more public engagement, a developer can come back and question our decisions just because we heard more public engagement. I asked to see case law that supported that, and I couldn't get an answer. Instead, I was told that having the lawyers look at that was too expensive. So I
Are there
called.
other towns that do that
There are other towns who allow more public engagement in planning and zoning. And as
during the process in the way you describe?
yes, they will allow public engagement. Now, they will not allow random public engagement at, XYZ Main Avenue. Okay. In other words, that's a confined process to that development and has to be handled in a very specific process. But I've been refused on planning and zoning to even have more engagement in, gee, what kind of access should we demand to the grounds of apartment buildings? Or more general discussions which aren't affecting a specific property. I mean, I get that a specific property, it's a legal process that's being done and it really needs to recognize everyone's rights. But the general discussions aren't even happening. And the opinion that was expressed to us of town council was, why would you want to do that? That's not a good idea, which is just so adverse from a litigious point of view that you just wonder, you got to stand for something. I mean, it's terrible. It also goes back to the budget. We don't theoretically don't have budgets for lawyers to
Right.
stand up for us.
tell me from like an on the ground kind of thing? You talk about free range roving children and that
Yes.
I bringing your kids in. What would you like to see in the downtown, for instance? Like
I would just,
specific.
yeah, I would like to see a more vibrant community. I would like to see us actually encourage this development so that there are more people who have children and things living there. I would like to make sure that there are activities towards building things like parks and things like that, that people can do things. I think that we have to do that. The second thing is it's been tried, but it's taken years. Wilton is the town that everybody drives by. But on the same time, even though it's an effort to get there, if you went to New Canaan between the hours of 6 and 10 p.m., you would find a different level of activity of people in the town, the high school students, people out to dinner, all those kinds of things, because it's been actively encouraged to have that kind of streetscape community and those kinds of things with stuff going on. And I don't think the children in New Canaan are getting kidnapped or dropping like flies because they walked through town without parental supervision after 6 o'clock at night. I could be completely wrong on that. I have not seen statistics. But Wilton seems to be a almost set up as a go home bedroom community, if you think about it. And that's, something which I just would love to see change. I'd like to see more vibrancy. There is a huge question, which is everyone just drives by Wilton on Route 7. I mean, unless you know it's there, you don't go there. I mean, I've literally had friends, again, a scientific sample set, my one friend that I have in life. The People drive by Wilton and they had no idea that there was anything off of Route 7 in Wilton. We've had really interesting discussions on planning and zoning. Um, um, and this is sort of characteristic of sort of where the dialogue is. We've had discussions of why would you want people to see businesses from Route 7 as you're driving down Route 7? We've had discussions when yeah, the building on 33, is that the nature preserve, Jared and Heather, that has the new center on 33? We had people come and testify that it would be terrible to have the traffic come out of there because if they turned right, they would have to come all the way into downtown Wilton and it would affect that the effect would be there would be more traffic and people then in downtown Wilton. I mean, those kinds of ideas I don't think are compatible with energizing the town. It may be fine with people who want the town to be like it was 100 years ago, but it's not compatible with that. So I think something has to be done that really drives people. There's, coordinated recreation spots downtown, parking downtown. Well, address parking. I mean, all of our surrounding towns have built municipal lots and actually have a system and charge for parking in the downtown.
Where do you think a downtown parking lot could go?
Well, let's see. We would have to address ownership of some of the land that goes behind where Stop and Shop is, and we might have to make some of the existing lots and purchase them from people and make them municipal lots. You're right, Heather. There's not a lot of space there for those kinds of things. But again, it goes back to this stuff wasn't planned for. So we're going to have to figure out ways to put it in somewhere.
You saw that the housing committee was disbanded by the Board of Selectmen. That the first selectman said, well, the Wilton Capital Planning Committee will handle affordable housing. And they kind of, I think, are sort of going, I don't know if that's in our purview. So who's in charge? Is P and Z in charge of talking about affordable housing and making these plans, or what should be going on?
P&Z can take a role in terms of having planning discussions and suggesting changes to our zoning regulations, and can do that. That's different than a housing committee or having a housing commission in the town which would be a great thing to do that could look at in detail issues of affordability and who can live here and what kinds of things that we do. The first select person in Wilton seems to have a lot of opinions. Okay. Many of I don't understand what drives all of those opinions, but she seems to have lots of opinions.
Can you say on what you're referring to?
I think she has lots of opinions on how the town should be managed, what the roles would be of different people who run departments, understanding of the taxation process in town. I mean, I went to the town meeting last year and I was told that what really helped the budget for this year, the first select woman got up there and said, the budget this year did not, the taxes this year did not have to go up as much as they would because housing values in Wilton have, I'm paraphrasing by the way, but housing values in Wilton have increased over last year. And that's one of the biggest drivers of why the taxes didn't go up, which if last time I checked, it wasn't an appraisal year. And therefore, the price of housing in Wilton had nothing whatsoever to do with taxes being held down. And the only positive impacts on the taxes in town were either the new developments that came online or ASML. But I don't know if our first select person currently understands in depth how taxes work in Wilton or simply doesn't want to talk about it. I don't know that.
Okay. Um, but where else should planning and zoning focus on it for the master plan process?
Yeah, I think that some of what happens on Route 7 is incorporated into the village center plan, but I think we've really got to get our act together and think about Route 7, sort of top to bottom as it goes through town and really have a better idea of what we are trying to accomplish. Okay. And I think that could be done. Everyone talks about the bucolic and beauty of Wilton, which I agree if you're driving through the residential areas of Wilton. But if you asked me if I thought, Route 7 in Wilton is a work of art or beauty, which power substation or storage facility do you want me to talk about? I think it would be great to have I'm a little blunt in case you haven't. But I think that having an overall set of plans for Route 7 would really, really help the town establish itself as something that is people would look forward to. The second thing is, I think that we need better understanding of infrastructure. Okay, Wilton is a combination of paid and volunteer infrastructure. Some of it works really, really well. I happen to be fortunate to serve the town on the pension investment committee. We are way overfunded in our town pension because there are enough investment professionals on the committee that I think it makes sound decisions. There are other things that work well. But I'm a little dismayed when we get into suddenly whether or not the ambulance service is funded properly and can have a building becomes controversial in a town. I mean, this is just so short-sighted to me that I think the town needs to address these things in a different way. And then the third part of it is I'm just looking for some, I mean, I'm on planning and zoning. I'm looking for leadership from the selectmen. I don't really understand how many of these things that have become huge issues in the town to people that can manage well have even become issues. It just strikes me as, almost ostrich-like that any of these could become become issues. I mean, this town faces a $200 million plus infrastructure deficit. I mean, that's twice the town budget. And so, how does a little town in Connecticut that's a good place to live and things like that accumulate a $200 million budget deficit and no one knows about? And lastly, I think this is really a strategic issue, is the town owns and manages certain properties. I think it would be important to have very open discussion and disclosures that are put in front of the public of what are those properties? What rents does the town receive from those properties? How long were those leases put in place for? Is that the best utilization for that property in the town, or are there other things that we should be really should be doing? Now, currently there is discussion for us selling some properties in the world famous hope that you can sell off assets and close the deficit, which is always interesting when people are trying to close operating deficits by selling assets. But I think that that's not the discussion I'd like to see happen. I'd like to see some transparency about the properties that are owned in town and what we get from them and those kinds of things. Instead, what we have is crisis management, whether that's looking at, the farm or other kinds of things where issues become controversial for no reason and things like that. And we get distracted by that. And again, we don't have broad discussions in the town. So that's what I would love to see happen.
Okay. Not that a new amenity would be the Band-Aid cure-all, but since we've asked everybody this, you talked about having parks in town, but if you were to pick one amenity that you would love to see Wilton have, what would that be?
Um, I can't. The next question you would ask is where would we put it and things like that. But I would like to see Wilton have a more engaged sort of indoor outdoor recreation center that could be used by lots of people for lots of different kinds of things. It is a sports oriented town, and I'd really like to see that someplace that it's not just kids sports and those kinds of things, but Wilton has a lot of facilities, but they're scattered about, and I'd really like to see that. So that's the first thing I'd like to see the town address in terms of an amenity. Look, whether or not it has a dog park and an ice rink, I don't know the economics enough about dog parks and ice rinks. I like dogs myself, but it's that's aside from that. But I'd like to see something where there was a reason for people to do things. So, like, what the town doesn't have a lot of is centralized places where people interact. So if you go up to, every time I have a meeting, there are a bunch of people out back playing basketball. But, it's not like it's part of a rec center where people can interact. And I think Wilton really needs strong interaction as it moves forward. There's one other thing I didn't talk about. I'm not sure if we can get more. I think we can get more professional office space for doctors in town, perhaps. I don't know how much office space we can get in Wilton. One, the quality of the office space in Wilton really needs to be upgraded. Okay. And I think we should be encouraging that if there's any suggestions on office space at a P&Z level, which is that we need some more Class A office space. I think this stuff was Class A office space, but that was 35 years ago. And there are not, if you're looking at businesses in town here, there are not a lot of smart buildings and all kinds of things like that to help. But with the transportation issues, it's very hard to get businesses to move to Wilton. I am still astounded though. Like one of the companies that I own has office space in Southport. And the vacancy rate in Fairfield, I'm sorry, in office space is almost zero. And in Wilton, it hovers around, what is it, 50%, Heather, something like that, office space being filled.
Mhm.
And so there's really a disconnect between, what Wilton has in terms of viability of office space. And I'm scared that it spirals, because of that, Fairfield has more places to eat. And because of that, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy if you go the other way.
What's your 30-second elevator pitch for why voters should choose you?
I think that I am willing to bring real issues to the table, whether they make people comfortable or not comfortable to address, and to seek through information actual answers to the questions people have. So I'm not running to be liked. I'm running because I think that there's a need to get real things on the table. There we
Ken,
go.
thank you.